Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is the show where you can have your property related questions answered by a team of experts. And joining me today is Ryan Hughes, founder of the Mr. Investa brand, the buy-to-let marketplace. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks, Stephen.
Joining Ryan is Bobbie Jethwa, CEO and Director of UK Property Agents. Welcome to you, Bobbie. Good to have you back. Now then, Ryan, we're going to start with you. I'm setting up my first buy-to-let property and have almost finished the refurb and I'm ready to start looking for tenants. I've asked my solicitor about the cost of drawing up an assured short-hold tenancy agreement for my use, but they're quoting over £2,000. My proposed letting agent says I don't need that as they have a standard document for which they charge £50 a time. Any advice, please?
Go with your letting agent. As long as it's a reputable letting agent and they've got the red awareness scheme, the property ombudsman, them documents, especially some of the corporate chains, if they're willing to do it, they've already spent the money. You don't need that outlay.
I mean, I think we all know, you know, a solicitor's time cost is horrendous these days. You know,
all it is.
Could be £500, £1,000 an hour, whatever. I personally think the way around for this guy is not to do it this way round, is to take the £50 one and give it to his solicitor and say, just cast your eye over on this, you know, and you know, you may get away with half an hour then.
Yeah.
I mean, I do see, and I have seen in the past, letting agents taking down, you know, assured child tenancy documents off the internet, which are outdated. Very important to look at the date if you're going to download thing. But there are a lot of websites now that offer documents that are constantly updating. Yeah. So you can either use your letting agent or get your own.
I would say as long as it's a reputable letting agent, you know, they're going to be ready to go.
Bobbie?
Yeah, absolutely. I think £2,000? That's a bit extortionate.
Well, look, if you're asking a solicitor to create a document from scratch, you know, which is probably 4, 5, 6 pages.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to cost £2,000.
Yeah.
You know, he's not doing anything wrong. He's not ripping anybody off. It's just that this guy, I think, is going the wrong way about running his business, really, isn't
And
he?
the solicitor don't want to do it.
Yeah, yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, he's probably got bigger fish to fry. Yeah, but again, you know, even if your solicitor produces a document and it does cost you a couple of £1,000, you've got to be sure that they're in your market and that they are up to date with all the latest legislation and little clause alterations that are needed, don't you think?
I think you could just be opening a can of worms going down that road to make sure all the I's and T's are dotted.
Unless it's a specialist type agreement that you might have with a tenant and maybe there's some extra stuff that you might need that's over and beyond the standard AST, then I think, you know, you just go to a reputable agent and go down that route, really.
Well, the reputable agents are turning over a lot of properties and they're not going to want an ineffective lease because it's going to fall on their lap to put it right if it goes wrong.
I think it depends, again, what the property is. If they need something bespoke, if it is a commercial and a resi, or it is a HMO, they're asking for something unique. And also, how many do they intend to buy? Are they just doing one? Or are they going to roll a portfolio out? It might be worth looking at it if they want certain clauses in there. You need the solicitor for it.
Yes. But it's only an insertion of a clause, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you could do it as a sort of rider at the end, couldn't you? If
Yeah,
there's
of
something
course.
special.
Yeah.
You wanted. Okay, well, that's good. I think we've saved him out of 1,500 quid or whatever it is out of the. Well, actually, we've saved
1950,
haven't we? Yes, 1950 out of.
We can do it for
£49.99. Get a penny change.
Yeah, we could do a sort of property TV special, whatever we like. Okay, great stuff. Thank you for that, Ryan. Bobbie, could the panel please explain the difference between rental guarantee schemes and the let-to-let arrangement? Further, which would be the panel's recommendation or preference in terms of these schemes? Now, I just think before you answer that, I have a feeling I know what your answer is going to be, but would you like to just explain to our viewers the actual difference there? In other words, what is a let-to-let scheme and what is a rental guarantee scheme?
Okay, so a let-to-let scheme is where a person takes the rental and then rents it out to a third party.
Right.
And that third party could be like, generally they're mostly Airbnbs and stuff like this, where they re-rent the property, get a higher rental income, and pass that rental income, take their percentage and pass it on to the landlord.
So as a landlord, I would be hoping that the guy that takes it from me, or lady, of course, is a stronger bet than the subtenant.
Than the subtenant, because then they don't have the hassle of dealing directly with the tenant themselves. So they would be the intermediary between the tenant and themselves.
Okay, and then I'm guessing that the actual rental guarantee scheme is probably more like an insurance policy, is it?
Well, no, the rental guarantee is more based on so you've given your property to a rental guarantee company who has now taken over a lease of your property. So they are now leasing between 3 to 5 years. They cannot do less than a 3-year lease.
Why?
Simply, you can't evict the tenants in time to give them back the property. So you're going to have to.
What, even if you're issuing a short-hold tenancy?
Yeah, to the tenants, yeah, of course. If you're issuing a tenant an AST, by the time you've done, so we've taken the property on today.
Yeah.
We've now, the tenant decides they want to stay there for 1 year, then they want to leave.
Yeah.
But you still got a 3-year contract with the rent guarantee company. So we can then take that tenant out and put him into another property, and still pay the owners their rental. So even if the property is empty, they will still get paid because we are guaranteeing their rent. But if that owner decides to come back at you and say, well, no, I need my property back in 12 months, it's impossible.
Right.
Because you obviously got a tenant that's living in that property. They might want to stay for another 3 years. So then you'd have to take them to court. Yeah. Then if you're taking them to court, then that's another 8 months. So you need a notice period from the owners that they want their property back. By the time you give them their property back, you need to make sure that all the property is given back in the condition that they gave it initially to yourselves. So the turnaround, I would say, looking at around 3 years. You can't realistically try and get it.
Do you know what? All as I'm going to say, I'm glad you're around to run these things. It sounds a nightmare to me.
It can be, yeah. It can be, because it's the people that are effectively living in the property, and most of them. I mean, if you're dealing with local authorities and stuff, they have kids. So and they would have to find alternative accommodation. So it's a double-edged sword, and it needs to be at least a 3-year contract.
Just on that subject that you just touched on, I mean, we're reading a lot in the papers, aren't we, about the cost of living crisis and the difficulty it's causing a lot of people. Where tenants are a family and they do have children, do you think there will be any special provisions from the government or anybody else in terms of evictions or in terms of softening, the consequences of non-rent payment? Are we heading that way?
I don't know. Is the answer to that question. I don't know what the government's going to come out with next. So
I mean, we had it in COVID, didn't we?
I think it's a bit of a monster of how you assess that. I think there'll be a huge drove of landlords selling, and there'll be families looking to get alternative accommodation that isn't there. I don't think next year with the offload, we've touched on it previously, homelessness at the moment, and the homes not being built quick enough, there's going to be a big problem next year.
Yeah. I suppose the difficulty with any scheme that would do that to sort of make life easier, it's not the starting of it, is it? It's where you would finish it.
Yeah.
That's the problem, isn't it? At what point do you say, no, this isn't going to happen anymore?
Because everything keeps increasing. Yeah. So you can't it's not like put a pin in it and that'll resolve it. The prices are continuously going up.
Yeah. Do you think we're in for difficult times in the rental market?
I think in terms of certain landlords where finance is concerned, there's going to be a huge offload on top of the EPC changes. There's going to be a huge offload, but the services there that can sell it to another landlord to keep them people in the property. That's the key.
Just to explain to our viewers, the new EPC regulations means that you won't be able to let a property unless it reaches a certain standard of insulation and energy efficiency. Yeah.
And I think the biggest problem with that is if you've got a sub £100,000 property, the windows and the doors cost the same as a £300,000 property. So, and you know, it may be £5,000 to upgrade your property. Well, some of these sub £100,000 properties may not generate £5,000, so the landlord effectively has to wipe off a year's worth of rent to do them changes. So I don't believe that they will. There'll be certain ones.
In a different programme with a different panel, we did have a question about this, where somebody was saying, look, I've been advised by my agent that my house is nowhere near the efficiency level it needs to be. So he's reluctant to take it on. He's reluctant to market it because it'll end in an abortive sale. But I just haven't got the money to do the retrospective work to get it up to scratch. So what do I do? And the answer was not very much.
Yeah.
Difficult. Okay, well, look, there we are. That's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break when we'll be asking Bobbie and Ryan more of your questions. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm joined by Bobbie Jethwa and Ryan Hughes. And Bobbie, we're going to go to your second question. I'm looking to start a small retail operation in or around London. I've looked at many secondary high street locations, but every time I find a suitable shop, inquiries about the level of business rates just rules the properties out. Are the panel aware of any startup schemes or assistance packages that could get relief to this? And also, although there's talk of business rate changes in the press, is anything likely to happen anytime soon to encourage new business?
Stephen, this is not exactly my niche. However, I'll give it a go. And I think, the government needs to obviously look at for new entrepreneurs and people that are starting off their businesses to give them business rate relief. Maybe they can go to their local authorities and see what kind of percentages they get relief on their business rates. That could be one avenue, and it depends on where the retail unit is, what kind of high street it is.
I'm presuming that the same rules that say in an office where you've got less than X number of employees, your business rate goes right down to a level where it's almost exempt at some point, doesn't it? I would have thought the same sort of provisions are there for shopkeepers, aren't they?
I think it will depend on size. We've seen a lot, especially in the northwest, of mixed-use units. So there's multiple businesses in one unit, and whether that's done collectively or not, I wouldn't know. But especially the spaces on the high street, you're going to pay for them, which is why most of the high streets that I've seen are sort of gone really downhill, because there's just people can't get into them because of these business rates.
Maybe the landlords could include them in their leases.
Well, I know in this building in particular, for instance, below a certain square footage, you're actually totally exempt from business rate. And you just quoted the idea of number of different units going in the same sort of.
I think that's why they do it, to sort of work around it. But I think it's quite clear that there's nothing really there for them in terms of relief at the moment.
With landlords thinking, I must rent this property, and therefore reducing the rents and encouraging new people in, to just kill it with high business rates is crazy, isn't it? We are just going to head for a recession if we.
I think if you look at some of the retailers, I've spoken to someone last week about them not having the heating on. When you look at the heating and the lighting in some of these retail units, who's going to pay it then? So it's all right getting a relief on it, but the landlord, are they doing the bills inclusive model? Are they adding it into the rent? I don't even think you can factor it in on especially some of these commercial units that we've seen that are empty. I think they're going to stay like that until they get turned into some sort of residential apartments or co-working, which I believe is a good avenue to move to, because there is reliefs on the co-working.
Yeah. It would be a shame to see our high streets go any further into recession or depression, whichever you call it. I mean, they are a vibrant part of any town or large village, aren't they?
I think the most sort of disappointing thing, it's good on one hand, bad on the other. We've had some situations in Salford in Manchester where they've let big companies, big supermarkets house all these different businesses, whether it be furniture, whether it be clothing, and then all of a sudden, don't worry, we've built 2 schools, but then they've just left a shopping centre to rot because they've let these huge supermarkets really kill it. And I think that now with the high street, why'd you go to the high street when you can go to one of these big supermarkets? And a lot of it's there.
I think here in London we've probably got a better attitude to it than a lot of places. I know I won't mention the actual street, but I can think of a little boutique street off Oxford Street, for instance. I walked down it a couple of years ago, and out of probably 30 odd shops, there was 14 vacant. Wow. Okay. And if you talk to people, it was the business rate that put them off. So I don't know what's quite been done to alleviate that problem, but now that street is full again. Oxford Street is now pretty full, whereas again 2-3 years ago it was full of pop-up shops and not the usual sort of thing you'd want to find on a major shopping street.
Shopping malls and stuff, their rates are quite drastically high too. So there were quite a few empty units, like in Brent Cross, for example, there was quite a few empty units. Now I think the head tenant there is maybe Marks or John Lewis. I think they might be the head tenant. So they obviously
they've pulled the people in
again and got the.
Well, I think Brent Cross in particular has had quite a lot of money pumped into it to regenerate.
And they're still doing that whole regeneration up there. So I mean, that could be.
All is not lost.
Well, I think the footfall's increased. I think people's appetite to spend, whether we're looking at a recession or not. You go around today, there's people spending money.
Well, it's a funny thing you say that, Ryan. We read all in the paper about the recession and all the rest of it. I've got a friend that lives just off Regent Street, and he says he doesn't really want to open his front door. He just can't get in the street for shoppers. And he said they're not just walking about. They've got the carrier bags, they've got the goods that they bought. And
I think it's the classic, there's so much doom and gloom. It's a bit of retail therapy.
It's all right if you've got a bit of money, isn't it? We're not all as rich as you. Okay. Ryan, your question. I read that some councils are resisting the government's directive to implement the new permitted development objectives. Assume this is accepted. I wanted to purchase an empty office building for an HMO project. Would my right to do this under the permitted developments, would my right to do this override the council's objections to the creation of an HMO in that area?
I don't think it would completely override it, but I think you'd have a point of view on it to state your case of it. But the council will, I believe, still have the final say on it, and there'll be multiple reasons of why they knock it back if it's the area.
I'm presuming that I can't. You will know, it's not my field, I'm afraid, but HMOs require a particular license, don't they? And there's a subsection of that which says, no, we don't have HMOs in this area. I can't remember what it's called now. But
so
Section 4 or something.
Yeah, so they have certain areas, they don't have the appetite for it because it doesn't work to the area. We've seen people do it, and you'll see a random street that's 2 3-bed terraced houses in Liverpool, and then someone's added another story on, and it skew-whiffs the whole demographic of the area, the pricing, and I think they have. I think sometimes they do a good job in terms of what goes with the area. I know it can be a bit of a pain sometimes for people wanting to do that, but what happens is these houses in Liverpool that may be £200,000, someone wants a valuation of £400,000 for the same house that they've extended to, and no one will lend on it. So actually the council do a good job in in saving people, you're not going to be able to refinance it, or when you sell it on, it'll have to be to a cash buyer because the average price doesn't stack up with the area and the demographic in that area.
Have you come across this at all, Bobbie?
It's not sort of, no, I wouldn't say I have. But yeah,
Do you find the London councils are allowing this permitted development, or are they being difficult?
A few, but I think they're being very, very cautious about it because they don't like the sound of like loads of HMOs coming up and stuff like this. I think they're trying to be a bit more cautious.
It's a very difficult balance to achieve, isn't it? The need for housing versus, you know, aesthetics and demographics.
I think if you can get someone out to assess it, we've been successful in the past with local authorities, and they'll come and they'll tell you and they'll advise on what they will allow. So it may not be to your full plans because everyone wants to do 20 stories or 60 stories, but they will say, you know, you can have 3 floors, you can't have 4 floors. You know, it has to be in keeping with the design of the building.
And also
so they
the
don't
view of other buildings and the obstructions.
Yeah, and its use. There's an area near one of the universities that we operate, and they were all offices, and then one just said, you know, we'll do it like for like. We'll keep it within keeping, but we don't want offices anymore. The 3-story, gorgeous Victorian townhouses, and now they're predominantly 8 to 10 bed HMOs, but they're still really big. So they were good for a purpose, and that demand from the university needs that accommodation because the university can't accommodate all the students. So it's like, it assists them in a way. So it's a case of, yes, you can do it because it's actually needed to this area. It's when people go to really cheap areas and try and do it and create these big monsters that people do. And it's like, well, you know, once they let one person do it, everyone does it. And that's
change of use, I think, is more the way. I think they're a bit more inclined with commercial to change to residential.
But I think, Ryan, I think you raise a good point. You know, a lot of people treat planners and the planning office as the sort of enemy. And it really does pay. Just get them on side, get them out to see what you want to do, explain what you want to do. Don't try and be sort of subversive about it.
You never,
and you'll get the help.
You never win. And the fact is, if you actually because they don't do it as quick, like anything with local authorities or government, it's never quick. But if you're actually working alongside them, you have much better results. You know, I have no problems with someone knocking back a development and saying we need more green space. We don't want as many cars. You know, there is people that go, no, I want my car here. Yeah, but what about the community that this is going to disrupt? You know, what about the children in the area that you're going to take the green space away from? So I think if you work with them, everyone, it's like
you have to give and take.
It's give and take, and I think everyone will always have a bad case, but actually some developers will continue on that warpath of, we've got the funds, we can sell it, we'll build it. Well, actually, we don't need it.
Okay. Well, on the subject of give and take, I'm going to give you my great thanks for your contributions today. Ryan Hughes, founder of Mr. Investa brand, and Bobbie Jethwa, CEO of UK Property Agents. Thank you both very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Stephen Galpin. I shall look forward to seeing you next time on Property Question Time.